Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, June 12th, day 250 since October 7th. And, we talk about pride goeth before the fall. Yesterday, I was so certain I got the date correct. And through tears, I even checked the numbers twice, and I mentioned that yesterday was July. It is not July, it is June. As my partner who posts these videos, Fail, so graciously said to me, she said, my dear friend May, it's June 11th, not July 11th. So today is June 12th. I wanted to read to you what she wrote to me, though, because I wanted to summarize a bit of why we do these videos. She said, I love how you said that you knew what day it was, and she just said, all the grace, this is hard work, and it's okay. And she said, but I promise you, she was responding to my comments about feeling so badly that I cry so much. I cry all the time. And sometimes it just feels like I can't speak, or I lose my words. I obviously lose my months, but sometimes I feel like I lose my words. And so just in responding to the video from yesterday, Fail wrote this to me, and she said, I promise you, you do not cry more often than not. And your tears are a bitter but healthy reminder of the need for our hearts to be soft. Hard hearts are the only thing that will prevent tears. So, oh Lord, let us cry rivers for all of these precious people. And I just thought that was so beautiful. And you don't have the opportunity to meet Fail, but she has done these videos for 250 days with me. And she, look, I'm crying again, encourages me. And, the community that we are literally around the world, from Palestine to South Africa, Israelis and people all over the United States and all over the world who are saying, what can we do? Who are allowing our hearts to be broken and saying, we are committed to working to end violence and saying enough is enough. And so if we can encourage one another, and if our tears encourage one another, may we allow our hearts to be broken, and then may we be mobilized to work to end violence and work to end, the ongoing deaths and atrocities in Gaza, and contribute towards peace. So lots of updates for today, June 12th, day 250. There is not movement on the hostage ceasefire deal. The United States is saying that it's Hamas's fault. Hamas has been consistent. They do not want to release hostages until there is assurance that there will be an end to the war on Gaza. Hamas responded to the proposal that this is the U.S. peace plan. Initially, there was a response from the U.S. that said they thought the changes were minor, and then Secretary Blinken said that there were numerous changes. And so I'll go into some of the more details about that, I think later. I must not be as organized as I thought. But essentially, there's not significant movement. Qatar and Egyptian mediators met, and Secretary Blinken had been in the Middle East. But there's just not movement. There's just not movement. It seems like Israel is not willing to say it will bring the war to an end. Hamas is not willing to release the hostages, which desperately need to be released. We are calling for an end to war, for the hostages to be released, for Palestinians who are held unjustly in prisons. I just got an update today on Layar Nasser, who is the young Palestinian woman, a young Christian woman who was in administrative detention, and I heard she's not doing well. We're hoping to talk to her mother sometime soon. I was speaking to Reverend Dr. Monter Itzhak. He's who I was with today. And so many Palestinians are not doing well in Israeli prisons, and we are calling for those who are being held unjustly, of whom there are so many, to be released. Hamas had said that they would return hostages' bodies in the first phase of truce, demanding a full IDF withdrawal for Gaza for the swap. Hamas demanded that the deal stipulate an Israeli withdrawal from areas of Gaza in the first week of the deal's implementation, and that if Israel did not do so, the release of hostages would be halted. It seems that the changes that they made were to ensure that the war on Gaza would ultimately be brought to an end. They are seeking a complete cessation of fire from the Israeli army. On the third day, the idea was that Hamas would release hostages every 3 days. On the third day, Hamas would seek Israel's withdrawal from Salah ad-Din Road, and in return, they would release 3 hostages, living and dead, and then every 3 days, they would release a total of 33 hostages. And that was kind of, I think, their edits to proposed Plan 1. That came from Haaretz, whereas Secretary Blinken, when he was questioned about this, would not speak to what Hamas's edits were. Hamas told Haaretz that the amendments submitted were intended to ensure that the withdrawal and ceasefire was established in the first phase, and Israel would not be able to evade the implementation at all stages of the deal. So the U.S. plan was that the first phase was temporary, and during those 6 weeks, then a permanent ceasefire would be negotiated. That would be phase 2, the permanent ceasefire, and then phase 3 would be the rebuilding phase of Gaza. Hamas also opposed any preconditions on which Palestinian prisoners could be released from Israeli jails in return, as well as their distancing from Gaza, and demands their release based on the amount of time that they have spent in Israeli prisons. It additionally demanded its response that China, Russia, and Turkey be guarantors of the deal. While Hamas said earlier Wednesday, today, that it had a positive response and it opened a wide pathway to reach an agreement, Israel said that it was tantamount to a rejection. So this morning, Jake Sullivan had said there were only minor changes proposed by Hamas, but by the afternoon, Secretary Blinken had contradictory statements saying what Hamas had proposed was unworkable. And there were numerous changes. Some were workable, some were not. He would not go into specifics. Blinken said Hamas could have answered with a single word yes, but instead they waited nearly 2 weeks, requesting numerous changes. The time for a decision is now. The longer this goes on, the more people will suffer. And when it took 12 days just to get a response that President Biden put forward, more suffering took place. The longer this continues, the greater the suffering will be. What I don't understand is why I have no issue with the accountability from the US. I just don't understand how it's so one-sided. Israel is killing civilians in Gaza, and we don't hear about that being an issue. And that's a problem. Russia's human rights commissioner said yesterday that she had issued a fresh appeal to senior UN officials to secure the release of Russian nationals that are being held by Hamas in Gaza. And according to a new report from the Wall Street Journals detailing the conditions in captivity experienced by newly rescued Israeli hostages, 3 male hostages lived together in a dark room for half a year. Their captors would threaten to kill them and would punish them if they did not follow the rules. The death toll in Gaza, according to the health ministry, is 37,202 Palestinians killed, and those wounded is at least 84,932 since the beginning of the war. I wanted to give an update on Jerusalem. There's concerns about settler extremism and forced displacement. OSHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, has reported that 183 Palestinians from the Jerusalem government have been displaced since the beginning of the year. So this is since January, 183 Palestinians displaced. Over the past week, 55 Palestinians displaced, representing 30% of total displacement in Jerusalem since January 1st. Palestinians displaced in the Jerusalem government represent 36% of the overall people displaced in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. There also have been significant escalations in terms of the northern border of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon. Hezbollah sources told Haaretz that the group launched its most extensive attack on Israel since the start of the war in response to a killing that happened last night. An Israeli strike on the village of Jowiya in South Lebanon last night killed at least 4 people, including a Hezbollah field commander, Taleb Abdallah. That's the most senior Hezbollah commander to be killed by Israel since October. And so today, Israel reported that more than 215 rockets were fired by Hezbollah in response to the killing of their field commander into northern Israel. Fires broke out. There were no deaths. I don't know if there were injuries. Following the Hezbollah rocket barrage, the Israeli army said that it struck a number of rocket launch sites in South Lebanon, and 15 rockets were fired from Lebanon towards the city of Kiryat Shimona and several towns in northern Israel last night or yesterday. And Israel's army said that's when it responded, striking South Lebanon. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Health Ministry said Israeli forces had killed 6 Palestinians during yesterday's raid in the West Bank. The Israeli army said 4 of those who were killed were militants and were killed in an exchange with fire with troops in a village of Kefardan near Jenin. So 6 Palestinians killed yesterday in an IDF raid in the West Bank. And the Israeli government informed the High Court on Tuesday that by the end of June, all detainees in Israel's Sadet Taman detention facility will be moved to other prisons in Israel or released to Gaza. So this is one of the detention facilities that's gotten the most attention because of the conditions. Many rights groups have said the conditions are inhumane and that incarceration there would constitute a war crime. So the Israeli government has informed the High Court that by the end of June, all of those detained there will be relocated. Israel told the High Court of Justice yesterday that the Security Cabinet approved the decision not to return the body of Palestinian security prisoner Walid Daka to his family, intending to use it as a bargaining chip in future hostage and prisoner swaps with Hamas. And the Houthis have, according to U.S. Central Command, destroyed 2 anti-ship cruise missile launchers. The U.S. Central Command said it destroyed 2 anti-ship cruise missile launchers in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. Earlier this week, anti-Israel demonstrators gathered outside an exhibition in New York City. And I wanted to be sure to talk about this because the exhibition in New York was honoring people who were killed at the music festival, the Nova Music Festival, during the Hamas attack on October 7th. And so hundreds of people protested against Israel at this exhibition in New York, in Lower Manhattan. 360 people were killed at the Nova Festival. And so the location of this demonstration outside of this exhibition, which featured portraits of people who were killed at the Nova Music Festival, I think that actual items that were present at the location were brought to this exhibition, cars that were charred in the attack, personal belongings from some of the people who were there that day. So the exhibition was to seek to honor those deaths. And so several, according to the New York Times, anti-Israel protesters gathered there, and it was widely criticized from the city government in New York all the way to Washington, D.C., including the White House senior deputy press secretary, Andrew Bates, who condemned the anti-Israel protests as outrageous and heartbreaking. And I just think it's important for us to talk about that. And I don't have much commentary on it, but I wanted to at least acknowledge that it had happened. Also, the home of Ann Pasternak, who's the director of the Brooklyn Museum. I don't know if that's where that particular event was taking place, but her home was vandalized on Tuesday, as reportedly were other homes of Jewish board members of the Brooklyn Museum. Photos on social media showed red paint on her New York residence with a sign that said Ann Pasternak, Brooklyn Museum, white supremacist Zionist. And I do think, the rise of anti-Semitic acts and these types of vandalism, I think are deeply disconcerting. I think that they do not help the case for Palestinian justice. And that needs to be stated. And we need to speak out against anti-Semitism. And specifically speaking out against any act of violence. U.S. President Joe Biden urged attendees at an event in Washington, D.C. to be patient with pro-Palestinian hecklers who were interrupting him, insisting that they make a point. Innocent lives have been lost. So that happened as well. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation about what's going to happen, coming up, particularly in Washington, D.C., when Prime Minister Netanyahu comes here next month. At the end of July, Prime Minister Netanyahu is scheduled to speak in Congress. Finally, the United Nations report accused Israel and Hamas of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity on and since October 7th. The report was published by a commission formed in 2021 by the UN Human Rights Council to investigate human rights violations in Israel and Palestinian territories. So that's a lot of news, but, may we remember Fail's words and allow our hearts to be softened and continue in our efforts. Don't be discouraged, but continue to hold on to hope that peace is possible and that the devastation in Gaza and all suffering will be brought to an end.